The firestorm of Earth's final battle raged over as Captain Emily Grant stood on the ridge of the Vanguard, humanity's flagship, staring into the endless void. Her hands gripped the cold command console, her eyes unwavering. The planet they once called home was crumbling beneath the weight of an overwhelming alien force. The Thalkar, a race of merciless conquerors, had descended like a plague, their fleets too powerful and their weapons too devastating. The last hope of humanity was not the planet itself, but the ragged fleet that had managed to escape Earth's orbit in the dead of night, carrying the remnants of Earth's people. "Captain, we've cleared the Deris field," Lieutenant Vasquez reported from the tactical station. "We're still receiving Salkar pursuit signals, but they haven't caught up yet." "Good," Grant replied, her voice steely uptight with the pressure of the moment. The Vanguard was only one ship in a dwindling fleet, and the others were scattered across the dark reaches of space. Each vessel was battered, barely functional after the relentless bombardment. Their engines strained as they pushed through the stars, heading toward Haven, an ancient world humanity had never fully understood. Until now. Haven was meant to be a sanctuary, but it could also be a trap. A warning klaxon blared, snapping Grant from her thoughts. "Captain, Xalkar warship emerging from hyperspace." Vasquez's voice trembled slightly with urgency. Damn it. Grant's jaw tightened. She knew the odds were against them, but the fleet had no choice but to keep moving. "Divert to evasive course. All ships, engage when ready. We won't make it to Haven if they catch us here." The fleet surged into action, each ship veering in different directions to minimize their chances of a full-scale annihilation. The Vanguard fired its main cannons, sending powerful blasts into the oncoming alien ships, but they were no match for the Salkar's advanced shields. The blasts merely glanced off, leaving the enemy vessels untouched as they closed in. Grant watched through the viewports as one of their escort ships, a smaller frigate, was torn apart by the Salkar's weapons. Its destruction sent a shudder through the fleet. "Captain," came the voice of Commander Alex Kessler, her second in command. "We've got to make the jump to FTL, or we're dead. We're not leaving anyone behind." Grant snapped, her eyes burning with determination. Her mind raced. Every decision was a gamble. With their power systems trained from earlier battles, a jump to FTL would put them in danger of losing critical systems. But their options were quickly running out. The Vanguard fired again, this time targeting the Salkar's lead warship. The damage was minimal, but it was enough to give them the briefest window. "Initiating FTL jump in 3 minutes," she ordered. But the Salkar weren't going to let them slip away so easily. The enemy ship unleashed a barrage of missiles, and several struck the Vanguard's shields. Sparks flew across the ridge as the ship lurched violently. Crew members stumbled, but Grant stayed steady, gripping her console as she arced orders. "Brace for impact. Power to forward shields. Prepare for jump." Another explosion rocked the ship. They had seconds left. Captain." Vasquez's voice broke through the chaos. "We're losing power to the engines, Captain." Without hesitation, Grant slammed her fist onto the command console. "Do it now. Jump now." The Vanguard shot forward, and the rest of the fleet followed suit. The blackness of space lured around them as the jump took hold. The stars stretched into streaks of light, and for a split second, Emily thought they might not make it. But then, everything snapped back into normalcy. They were in the clear. But even as they coasted into the unknown, she couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her chest. Earth was gone. The Salkar had won the battle for their home. And now, only the survivors remained, with nothing but the unknown ahead. "Set course for Haven," she ordered softly, her voice filled with relief and dread. "It's our last chance." The fleet drifted through the emptiness of space, broken and battered alive, their momentum carrying them toward Haven, the fad-led sanctuary that was humanity's final hope. For days, there had been nothing but the hum of engines and the quiet whispers of the crew, who were unsure whether to celebrate their survival or mourn the loss of their homeworld. Captain Emily Grant had her eyes set on the distant planet, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and fears. Haven was their last refuge, but there was a nagging uncertainty about the world that gnawed at her. How could a planet, so far removed from galactic politics, have remained hidden from the Talcar? And why hadn't Earth's intelligence found it sooner? As they neared the planet, Haven's blue-green surface shimmered, a stark contrast to the bleakness of space. It looked almost peaceful, too peaceful. The sensors showed no signs of hostile activity, no large ships in orbit, no signs of any civilization. The world was a mystery, its long-forgotten secrets lying beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. "Captain, we've arrived in orbit," Lieutenant Vasquez announced, his voice steady but tinged with the same uncertainty that Grant felt. Grant nodded, staring out of the ridge's viewport. "Prepare the landing teams. We'll make planetfall soon, but I want to be cautious. We don't know what's down there." Haven's surface was covered in sprawling forests and vast oceans. Its atmosphere was Rethela, its gravity similar to Earth's. Everything looked perfect for settlement. But Grant couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The landing party consisted of Grant, Commander Alex Kessler, and a small team of engineers and security personnel. They touched down on the edge of a large, ancient ruin that stretched into the jungle. The buildings were weathered and broken, their shapes unfamiliar and unlike anything human civilization had ever built. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and strange flowers, the humidity oppressive. "We've set down," Kessler said as the ship's hatch opened, his voice carrying a hint of apprehension. "What do you think, Captain? Can we make this our new home?" Grant stepped out first, boots crunching on the soft ground. As she surveyed the ruins, the architecture was undeniably alien, with spires that reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers. But there was something about the design that felt familiar. A chill ran down her spine. "Stay alert," Grant warned her crew. "We don't know what's in here." As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the eerie silence was broken only by the sounds of distant animals and the rustle of leaves. The team found walls covered in strange symbols, which appeared to be some form of writing, though completely unrecognizable. There were signs of age. Millennia of time had worn away the structures, but no signs of decay that would indicate a natural extinction. The place had been abandoned, but for how long? The group continued to explore, finding artifacts and objects that seemed out of place. Advanced technology, tools that looked far beyond anything humanity had ever achieved. Kessler uncovered a strange device embedded in a broken altar, its surface etched with the same symbols that adorned the walls. "Captain, this looks like something from another age. It's nothing like what we've ever seen," Kessler said, his fingers tracing the device's intricate surface. Grant moved closer, her instincts tingling. "Is it functional?" "Not sure. But it's definitely not just an ornament," he replied, his voice tense. "We might be looking at something important. May even a weapon." Grant's eyes narrowed. "Whatever it is, we need to be careful. We don't know who or what left it here." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A low rumble, like thunder, echoed through the air. The team froze, weapons drawn, as the tremor passed. The ruins were starting to shake, the once stellar buildings now cracking and shifting, as though the planet itself was reacting to their presence. "Captain," Vasquez's voice crackled through the comms, "we've detected unusual seismic activity beneath the surface. Something's down there, something large." Grant's heart raced. "Get back to the ship. Now." The tremors grew stronger, and the once silent jungle came alive with strange, unseen creatures. From the corner of her eye, Grant caught glimpses of movement, shadows darting between the trees, too fast to be natural animals. Something was watching them. And they weren't alone. "Everyone, move. Now." Grant arced, her voice cutting through the chaos. As the team rushed Ack toward the landing zone, the ground quaked again. This time, the ruins began to collapse, sending debris raining down around them. The once serene planet had turned hostile, and Grant realized with a growing sense of dread that Haven was no sanctuary. It was a trap. "Captain," Kessler shouted, his voice strained with panic. "We need to leave. There's something else here. Something alive." Grant's pulse quickened. She turned to face the crumbling ruins, her mind racing. The fight for survival was far from over. They had only just arrived, but already Haven was proving to be a far more dangerous world than they'd ever anticipated. The ground beneath Captain Emily Grant's feet shook violently as the team scrambled Ack toward the ship. The jungle around them seemed to come alive, the trees creaking and groaning as if something deep within the planet was stirring. Every step felt like it could either last, the sound of distant roars and crackling branches pushing them forward. The serene world they'd hoped would either salvation was rapidly turning into a death trap. "Move, damn it," Grant shouted, her voice tight with urgency. Her team was already ahead of her, but the tremors made it difficult to keep her footing. The alien ruins loomed behind them, crumbling under the strain of whatever force was yielding any at the surface. "Captain, I'm reading massive seismic fluctuations." Vasquez's voice crackled over the comms. "Something's emerging. Underground. It's Ig." Grant's heart skipped a beat. "Get us off this planet, Vasquez. Now." She heard the roar of an engine starting as the Vanguard's landing craft powered up, but the air was thick with tension. Something was coming, something that made the ground tremble, and the air smell sour. Grant turned to Kessler, who was struggling to keep his balance on the shifting ground. "What the hell did we just wake up?" Kessler asked, his face pale, sweat dripping down his row. "This planet, it's not just hiding secrets, it's alive." Grant clenched her jaw. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." With every step, the tremors grew stronger, and the air grew heavy with static, the once steady atmosphere now laden with an eerie hum. The forest was eerily silent, as if nature itself had been forced into hiding. Suddenly, a deafening crash sounded behind them, and Grant spun around in time to see the ruins collapse in on themselves. A massive structure, once a towering spire, led to the ground, disintegrating in a shower of dust and debris. A shadow moved through the cloud, too large to be anything natural. It was unmistakably alive. "Captain," Kessler yelled, his voice shaking with disbelief. "We're not alone." Then, the ground exploded at them. A massive, serpent-like creature, its scales glistening with an unnatural sheen, surged upward, its maw wide open. It was monstrous, easily twice the size of the Vanguard's landing craft, and it writhed with terrifying speed. Massive claws pierced the earth as it burst from the ground, its eyes glowing with an eerie predatory intelligence. "Everyone, fall back," Grant ordered, drawing her sidearm and firing into the creature's eyes. The shots barely left a dent. The creature roared, a sound so deep it rattled the ones of those who heard it. The landing craft was already lifting off, but the east was too quick. It lashed out, its tail slamming into the ship with enough force to send it spiraling out of control. The ship tumbled, its systems failing as it crashed into the jungle below, erupting in flames. "Get to the ship. Now," Grant screamed, her heart pounding. They had no time to think. The creature was only growing more enraged, and their chances of escaping it were rapidly dwindling. Kessler was the first to reek into a run, followed by the rest of the team. The creature roared again, the ground shaking beneath them as it gave chase. Grant could hear the thundering footfalls of the east behind them, each step a promise of death. Her thoughts raced as she pushed herself harder, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Haven had already proven to be more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. If they didn't make it back to the fleet, they'd be wiped out before they even had a chance to fight back. Come on. Kessler's voice was frantic as he reached the downed ship. Grant caught up, and they worked quickly to pry open the hatch. The rest of the crew was already inside, the cockpit flickering with power, the engine sputtering. "We're not going to make it," shouted one of the engineers, panic rising in his voice. "The controls are shot. We can't take off like this." Grant didn't hesitate. She grayed the emergency control panel, overriding the damaged systems with what little she knew. She could feel the east closing in, the ground quaking with each roar. They had seconds before it was too late. "Get us out of here," Grant yelled, her hands moving with practiced speed. A flicker of light, then another. The ship groaned as its engines roared to life. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The craft lurched upward, scraping against the wreckage of the fallen ruins as it broke free from the creature's reach. Grant exhaled in relief, her eyes scanning the horizon as they pulled away from the deadly landscape. Behind them, the creature screamed in frustration, but it couldn't reach them now. For a moment, everything seemed eerily calm, until the radio crackled to life. "Captain, we've got Salkar ships coming in fast," Vasquez reported, his voice tense. "They found us." Grant's pulse quickened. "How long until they arrive?" "Less than 10 minutes, Vasquez replied. "We're not safe yet." Grant's mind raced. Haven had already proven itself to be a deadly world, and now they were out to face the wrath of the Salkar once again. Their reef respite was over. "We can't afford to fight them here," Grant said, her voice low and resolute. "Set course for the fleet. We need to regroup, and fast." The Vanguard's engines roared as the ship accelerated into the sky, leaving the shattered world of Haven and its terrifying secrets behind. But even as they fled, Grant couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was just beginning. The Vanguard hurtled through the atmosphere of Haven, its hull rattling as the ship ascended into the cold void of space. Captain Emily Grant stood in the command center, her gaze fixed on the star-streaked horizon, where the once promising planet was now far behind them. The looming threat of the Salkar fleet was real, but it was the alien creature that had stalked them through Haven's jungles that gnawed at her thoughts. They had barely escaped with their lives, and she knew that whatever lay on that planet was far worse than they could have imagined. "Status report, Lieutenant Vasquez," Grant demanded, her voice steady uptight with tension. "We're clear of the atmosphere, Captain. Salkar ships are still on intercept course, but we got some time before they're in firing range," Vasquez replied, his hands flying over the console as he monitored their sensors. "We need to buy ourselves some breathing room," Grant muttered, turning to face her second-in-command, Commander Alex Kessler. "How are the fleet's other ships?" "Scattered, but they're alive," Kessler said, his jaw tight. "Some are in worse shape than others, but the rest of the fleet is limping toward the rendezvous point. We got no more than an hour before the Salkar catch up to us. Once they do, we'll be sitting ducks." Grant clenched her fists, frustration mounting. The fleet had no choice but to fight. They couldn't outrun the Salkar forever, and they couldn't afford to risk Haven's deadly secrets. If they didn't regroup soon, they'd be wiped out, one ship at a time. "Set course for the rendezvous. Tell the fleet to race for Adel," Grant ordered, her voice cold with resolve. Kessler nodded and turned to relay the orders to the communications crew. The room fell into a tense silence, only broken by the quiet hum of the Vanguard's engines and the occasional crackle of the comm system. The alien fleet would be upon them soon, and Grant knew they needed every advantage they could muster. As the ship accelerated toward the rendezvous, the stars around them seemed to close in, the black void of space growing ever more oppressive. The Vanguard was not built for large-scale battles. It was a symbol, the last bastion of humanity's military power. She had no illusions about their odds, but they had one asset that Salkar didn't: the resolve of every soul aboard her ship. "Captain," Vasquez's voice broke through her thoughts. The Salkar fleet is shifting formation. They're getting ready to engage. Grant's stomach tightened. Let's give them a fight they won't forget. The Ridge crew scrambled, preparing for combat. The Vanguard's weapon systems powered up, and the tactical displays flickered with live data. The fleet had scattered, but the Vanguard was leading the charge, its powerful guns aimed at the enemy ships. Fire when ready, Grant ordered. The Vanguard's cannons blazed to life, sending massive bursts of energy into the oncoming Salkar warships. The alien vessels returned fire, their energy beams arcing toward the human ships, lighting up the darkness of space. The Vanguard rocked as it took a direct hit, its shields flaring with a burst of energy. Shields holding at 70%, Captain Vasquez reported, his voice steady yet strained. We've taken damage to the aft hull. Minor reaches in the outer plating. Get us back on course, Grant arced, gripping the armrest of her chair as the ship lurched with another hit. Don't let them get any closer. Engaging evasive maneuvers, Vasquez called out. The Vanguard veered sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding a deadly volley of energy blasts. The ship's hull shuddered with the effort, but the maneuver bought them precious seconds. The Salkar fleet was relentless. Grant could see the enemy ships closing in, their advanced weaponry tearing apart the smaller human vessels. The Vanguard was still standing, but it was clear that the fight would be long and grueling. Where are the others? Grant demanded, her eyes scanning the tactical display. The other ships were scattered across the battlefield, engaging the enemy with varying degrees of success. We've got a few ships trying to regroup, Kessler replied, his voice low. But they're taking heavy fire. We're the main target right now. Grant's mind raced. They couldn't let the Salkar pick off the fleet one by one. The Vanguard had to lead the counterattack, rally the remaining ships, and force the enemy into a retreat. We're not backing down, Grant muttered under her wreath, her gaze hardening as she watched the Salkar ships draw nearer. Vasquez, open a channel to the fleet. A moment later, the Ridge speakers crackled to life. This is Captain Grant. All ships, form up on the Vanguard. We engage as one. No retreat. We fight together or we fall together. Do you understand? A series of affirmatives crackled back over the comms, and Grant felt a surge of hope. The remnants of humanity's military might were still united in their fight. They would not be erased, not without a struggle. Let's give them hell, Grant said. The Vanguard fired again, its powerful cannons striking the Salkar flagship. The alien ship shuddered under the assault, but it didn't falter. The enemy was stronger, but the humans were determined, and for the first time since leaving Earth, Grant felt something akin to hope. The battle had only just begun. The battle raged in the cold expanse of space as the Vanguard and its ragged fleet of survivors fought against the overwhelming might of the Salkar. Explosions lit up the darkness as energy beams and missiles streaked through the void, tearing through the fragile hulls of human warships. The Vanguard itself had become a beacon of defiance, its weapons firing relentlessly into the heart of the Salkar formation. But despite their valiant efforts, the enemy's technological superiority was too much to overcome. Human ships were falling, one after another, like leaves in a storm. Captain, we've lost the Liberty and the Defender, Vasquez reported, his voice grim. The Endurance is barely holding on, and the rest of the fleet is scattered. The Salkar are picking us off one by one. Grant's heart sank. The fleet, their last hope, was crumbling. They couldn't let the Vanguard fall. If they did, humanity's last bastion would be gone, and the Salkar would wipe out the survivors on Haven. Their entire struggle would be for nothing. Tell the fleet to fall back to the gravity well. We can use it to our advantage, Grant ordered, her voice sharp and filled with resolve. We'll regroup there and fight. As Vasquez relayed the orders, the battle continued around them, a brutal dance of survival and death. The Vanguard danced through the firestorm, taking hits and returning fire with all the might it could muster. But every blow the ship took, Every energy blast that ripped into its hull weakened them. The crew fought tirelessly, but the sense of urgency was mounting. Time was running out. Kessler stood next to Grant, his eyes scanning the redouts. "Captain, we're outnumbered and outgunned, even with the gravity well. I don't think we can hold them off long enough for the fleet to regroup." Grant nodded, her mind whirring with options. "Then we fight smarter." She turned to Vasquez. "Signal the fleet to prepare for a coordinated jump. We're not just going to escape, we're going to ambush them." Vasquez looked at her, his face filled with doubt. "Captain, are you suggesting we engage the Xalcar with what's left of the fleet in a direct ambush? They've already proven they can crush us with ease." "I am," Grant replied coldly. "But if we don't take the fight to them, Haven will fall. And we'll be dead anyway. We have one shot at this, Lieutenant." Kessler didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "Understood." The Vanguard's engines fired up again, and the remaining ships of the fleet began to move in unison, veering toward the gravity well of a nearby gas giant. The plan was risky. If the Xalcar realized their trap too soon, they'd be wiped out before they had a chance to strike. But Grant knew that this was their best chance. They would have to use every trick. They had to outsmart the aliens. As they neared the gas giant's gravity well, Grant's tactical team began coordinating with the fleet, calculating the perfect moment for the ambush. The Vanguard would lead the charge, and the rest of the fleet would follow, launching a coordinated jump that would allow them to appear at the Xalcar's flank. The ships moved into position, preparing for the jump. The Xalcar, unaware of the humans' maneuver, continued their pursuit. But then, just as the moment to strike arrived, a new signal appeared on the radar. The Xalcar were not alone. "They're sending reinforcements," Vasquez said, his voice strained. "A massive fleet. We don't have the time to execute the ambush anymore." Grant's blood ran cold. The Xalcar had known they were being led into a trap. It wasn't just a pursuit. It was a calculated move to bait the humans into a no-win situation. "Captain, we need to disengage. We can't win this," Kessler urged. Grant clenched her fists, her mind racing. The clock was ticking, and the situation was dire. But there was something else, a voice inside her mind urging her to hold firm. If they ran now, they might escape, if only temporarily. But what would it mean for the people on Haven? They could never outrun the Xalcar. If they retreated, it would only be a matter of time before the aliens found Haven and finished the job. Grant turned to face Kessler. "We're not running. Not yet." She looked back at the viewports, her eyes hard with determination. The Vanguard's tactical display showed the Xalcar fleet closing in, with reinforcements pouring in from multiple directions. The trap had been sprung, but it was now clear that they were the ones in it. "There's only one way we can survive this," Grant said slowly, her voice low. "We need help." Kessler raised an eyebrow. "Help? From who?" Grant's eyes flicked to the data screens, and then back to Kessler. "From the creatures on Haven. There's something down there, something powerful. I think we woke them up, and now they're watching us." "Captain, you can't be serious," Kessler said, his tone incredulous. "We've barely escaped those things. We can't rely on them. It's insane." Grant's gaze hardened. "We don't have a choice. They're our only shot." The decision was made. With no time to hesitate, Grant activated the emergency beacon, sending a signal to Haven's surface, hoping that whatever lay beneath would answer. As the Xalcar fleet closed in, the Vanguard and what remained of the human fleet braced for what was to come, hoping, praying, that they weren't walking into an even deadlier trap. The atmosphere aboard the Vanguard was heavy with anticipation. Captain Emily Grant stood at the command center, her eyes locked on the tactical display as the Xalcar fleet closed in. She had made the call. There was no turning back now. The signal had been sent, and all they could do was wait, hoping the ancient force beneath Haven would respond in time. "Captain, we're being hailed by the Xalcar," Vasquez reported, his voice tight. "They're demanding our surrender." Grant's fingers clenched around the armrest of her chair. She had expected this, expected them to make the final move. The Xalkar were ruthless, and they knew humanity was on the brink of collapse. They wouldn't hesitate to finish what they'd started. "Tell them to go to hell," Grant said, her voice steady but laced with defiance. Vasquez hesitated for a moment but then complied, his fingers dancing over the communication panel. The Xalkar's harsh, alien language filled the speakers, a cacophony of anger and disdain. It was clear they weren't offering terms. They were ready to end the war, and humanity with it. The crew of the Vanguard braced for the worst. The massive alien fleet moved into position, their warships forming a near-impenetrable line. Grant knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, before the first salvo hit. Suddenly, the comms crackled. "Captain, we're receiving an unknown transmission. It's coming from Haven's surface." Grant's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped, prayed, that the signal would reach the planet, but she hadn't expected a response this quickly. She nodded to Vasquez. "Put it through." A deep, guttural voice filled the bridge, its tone strange and ancient. It was a language none of them understood, but it wasn't the words that mattered. It was the feeling that came with them. The hairs on the back of Grant's neck stood up, an instinctive sense that something vast, something unfathomable, was awakening on the planet below. "Captain, the surface, it's shifting. Something massive is rising," Kessler said, his voice filled with awe and terror. "This isn't just a creature, it's an entire ecosystem, alive." Grant's stomach churned as she turned her gaze toward the view screen. At first, it was barely noticeable, a dark shape moving beneath the clouds of Haven, like a shadow creeping across the landscape. But then, it erupted from the planet's surface with an earth-shaking roar, sending tremors through space itself. The creature was colossal, easily the size of a moon, and it appeared to be made of shifting, organic material that pulsed with energy. Tendrils, vast and sinuous, reached toward the sky, their movement slow but deliberate, like a vast, cosmic hand pushing upward. The Xalkar fleet froze for a moment, seemingly caught off guard by the sudden appearance of this monstrous force. "What is that thing?" Vasquez whispered, his voice a mix of awe and dread. "It's not just one thing," Grant muttered. "It's the planet. The entire planet is alive. Whatever we woke up, it's not just a predator, it's a force of nature. And it's not on our side." The creature's movements were erratic but deliberate, as though it was testing its newfound strength. Its massive tendrils lashed out at the Xalkar ships, tearing through them with terrifying speed. The alien fleet responded with fire, but their weapons had little effect on the creature's organic armor. It was as if their entire fleet was a mere annoyance to this ancient force. Grant's mind raced. The Xalkar were powerful, but they were not prepared for something like this. The creature was destroying them, ripping through the Xalkar ships as if they were paper, sending them scattering in all directions. It was clear that the tables had turned, but the creature's rampage was indiscriminate. It wasn't fighting to defend humanity. It was fighting for its own survival, and that meant no one was safe. "We need to get the fleet out of here," Grant said, her voice low and urgent. "Now." Kessler nodded. "We don't know how long it will hold back the Xalkar. It could be just a matter of time before it turns on us." Grant clenched her fists. She didn't know how long the creature would fight their enemies, or if it could even be reasoned with. The unknowns were too great, and the danger of remaining in the midst of a war between two alien forces was too high. "We're not running yet," Grant said. "The Vanguard is the only ship left in position to command what's left of the fleet. I won't leave them behind." She turned to Vasquez. "Send the order to the fleet. Regroup at the edge of the gravity well. We'll hold off the Xalkar long enough for them to escape." "Understood," Vasquez replied. The Vanguard surged forward, its weapons blazing as it targeted the incoming Xalkar ships. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy the remaining human ships time. The creature continued its assault on the Salkar fleet, tearing apart ship after ship with reckless fury. Grant watched the chaos unfold on the view screen, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and dread. The Salkar were being driven back, but it was clear that their survival was only temporary. The true danger lay in the force that had been awakened on Haven. Whatever it was, it had its own agenda, and humanity was now caught in the middle of a cosmic conflict far beyond their understanding. The battle was far from over. It had only just begun. The Vanguard sped through the chaos, its weapons firing in sharp, calculated bursts as it carved a path through the retreating Salkar fleet. But the battle around them was far from won. While the alien ships were being torn apart by the massive creature that had risen from Haven's surface, the true scope of the situation was only beginning to reveal itself. Grant knew that the Salkar would regroup. They had lost ships, but they were a cunning, relentless enemy. This victory was temporary. Humanity's survival depended on whether they could use this moment of respite to their advantage. "Captain, the fleet's nearly at the edge of the gravity well," Vasquez reported, his voice tense but steady. "We're holding the line, but I'm not sure how much longer we can keep this up." Grant clenched her jaw. They had bought time, but they couldn't afford to waste it. The Vanguard was already sustaining heavy damage, and the rest of the fleet had seen better days. She had seen the odds stack against them before, but this felt different. They had no backup, no reinforcements, and only one choice left: to face the Salkar head-on and hope they could hold off the inevitable. "We're not retreating," Grant said firmly. "We keep fighting. I want the fleet to prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're going to use the gravity well to our advantage." "Aye, Captain," Vasquez responded, but his voice betrayed his worry. Everyone on the bridge felt the pressure. The Vanguard was the last ship standing. If they failed now, humanity would be wiped from the stars. On the view screen, the massive creature continued its assault on the remaining Salkar ships, its enormous tendrils tearing through them like paper. Yet its movements were chaotic, almost as if it had no true strategy. It was a force of nature, not a soldier, and it seemed to care little for the conflict between humans and Salkar. It was merely fighting for its own survival, and that made it unpredictable. "We can't keep relying on that thing," Kessler muttered, his gaze fixed on the planet below. "It'll turn on us sooner or later. We're just too close to Haven. It's not an ally. It's a ticking time bomb." Grant nodded, knowing he was right. The creature's presence had already shifted the balance of power, but it wasn't an asset they could control. If they didn't sever their ties with it soon, they'd be crushed under its weight, just like the Salkar. "I've been thinking about that," Grant said, her voice low. "And I think I've got a solution. We need to get to Haven's surface. There's something down there that we've been ignoring. The signals we detected, the ruins, the strange energy signatures. They're not random. It's not just the creature. I believe there's a power beneath that planet, something ancient, something that Salkar have been hunting for a long time." "Captain, are you suggesting we land on Haven?" Kessler's voice was incredulous. "With the Salkar closing in on that thing wreaking havoc on everything. We'll never make it." Grant's eyes hardened as she fixed her gaze on the tactical map of the system. She could see the Salkar ships regrouping, moving into a tight formation, clearly preparing for another assault. They had moments, perhaps seconds, before that Salkar would come for them with everything they had. "We won't make it by running, Kessler," Grant replied. "But if we can make it to the surface, we might be able to unlock something that gives us a fighting chance. It's our only shot at turning the tide." There was a long pause as the crew absorbed the weight of her words. The idea of landing on a planet filled with dangers they barely understood, with an unpredictable alien creature raging on its surface, was terrifying. But Grant knew the stakes. If they didn't do something bold, they'd be obliterated before the day was out. Finally, Kessler spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "What do you need from me, Captain?" "Prepare a landing strategy," Grant said. We're going to fly as close to the surface as we can without getting obliterated by that thing. If we can get close enough, I believe there's a structure, something in those ruins we detected. It might help us understand what's really going on down there." "Understood," Kessler replied, his expression hardening with determination. "I'll make the arrangements." Grant turned back to Vasquez. "Get the fleet ready to provide cover. We're going to need to buy as much time as possible while we make our approach." "Aye, Captain," Vasquez responded. His fingers moved quickly over the controls as he coordinated the movements of the remaining ships, positioning them as best they could between the Vanguard and the oncoming Salkar fleet. For a brief moment, Grant let herself breathe. There was a sense of inevitability to it all, but the determination was still there, burning fiercely. They had come so far. They had survived because they refused to give in, even when the odds were stacked against them. This wasn't just about saving themselves. It was about giving humanity a fighting chance. As the Vanguard began its descent toward Haven, the massive creature continued its rampage, unaware of their approach. The Salkar fleet, however, wasn't so easily fooled. They had regrouped, and they were ready to finish what they had started. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity would survive or be erased forever. The Vanguard plunged toward the surface of Haven, its engines straining against the massive gravity, well as it fought its way through the dense atmosphere. The remaining fleet hovered just above, providing what little cover they could. Explosions and laser fire lit up the darkened sky behind them, the remnants of the Salkar fleet closing in fast. "Captain, we're entering the upper atmosphere," Kessler called from his station. "We're going to get swarmed by the Salkar any moment now." Grant gripped the armrest tighter, her mind racing. She had one chance to make this work, and it was a long shot. Below them, the massive creature continued to battle the Salkar forces, its tendrils tearing through ship after ship, but its movements were unpredictable. It wasn't fighting for humanity. It was fighting for its own existence. That meant the humans' chances of surviving weren't in the creature's hands. They were in theirs. "We're close," Grant muttered, eyes fixed on the coordinates they had calculated. The signal had been clear. The energy beneath the surface was unlike anything they had encountered. It was a power so ancient, so vast, that it could change the course of the war or destroy everything in its path. The Vanguard shuddered as it plummeted deeper into the planet's atmosphere. The turbulence was fierce, and the ship groaned under the stress. Alarms blared as systems flickered, but Grant pushed forward, her determination unwavering. The fleet's cover was fading, and the Salkar were closing in. They had to make it to the surface. "Activate shields. Brace for impact," Grant ordered, her voice commanding despite the chaos. The Vanguard jerked violently as it broke through the cloud cover and descended toward the massive ruins below. The alien structure they had detected earlier stood in the distance, an enormous, jagged structure that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. It was no ordinary ruin. It was alive, connected to the planet's energy network in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. "Captain, we're too close. We'll crash if we don't slow down," Kessler shouted, panic rising in his voice. "I know," Grant snapped. "Override the stabilization protocols. Get us as close as you can. We don't have time to be delicate." With a final, gut-wrenching maneuver, the Vanguard's engines flared to life, slowing the descent just in time. The ship's hull scraped against the rocky surface of the ancient ruins as it touched down with a violent jolt, sending sparks flying from the undercarriage. But they had made it. They were on the ground. Grant wasted no time. "Vasquez, I need you on the surface. Prepare a team to secure the area. We need to find that power source, and we need to do it fast." "On it, Captain," Vasquez replied, his voice resolute. The crew scrambled to prepare for the descent into the unknown. With the Vanguard secured, the final shuttle was deployed to take them to the heart of the ruins. The Salkar were still up there, but Grant was determined to finish what they had started. The future of humanity rested on finding whatever ancient force lay beneath Haven's surface and unlocking its power. As they made their way toward the ruins, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The creature, still locked in combat with the Talcar, was not done yet. Its massive form could be seen in the distance, crashing through the alien ships with devastating force. But Grant knew they couldn't rely on it. Whatever was hidden beneath the planet was humanity's last chance. The shuttle's landing gear scraped against the stone as they touched down near the entrance to the ruins. The structure loomed before them, a colossal gate, weathered and ancient, covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly. It was a door to something much larger, much more powerful than anything they had encountered. "This is it," Kessler said, his voice filled with awe. Grant nodded, her mind clear despite the uncertainty of the situation. "Move out. Find what we came here for." As they stepped into the ruins, the air around them seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. The walls pulsated with light, and strange, mechanical structures embedded in the stone seemed to come alive as they approached. This place was more than just a ruin. It was a complex, a living, breathing entity. "Captain, there's something ahead. It's glowing," Vask said, pointing to a chamber deep within the structure. Grant's heart pounded in her chest. They had found it. The energy source. The ancient power that could either save them or destroy them all. They pushed forward, stepping into the chamber, and before them stood a massive, floating orb of light, surrounded by intricate geometric patterns. It pulsed with immense energy, its glow bright enough to blind. It was beautiful and terrifying. "This is it," Grant whispered. "Whatever this is, it's the key." But just as they moved toward the orb, the ground trembled again. The creature on the surface was not the only threat they faced. The Talcar fleet had regrouped, and they were coming. "They're here," Kessler said, his voice low. Grant took one last look at the orb, feeling its power thrumming through the air. They didn't have much time. They either unlocked its secrets and the future of humanity, or they would die trying. "Prepare to defend the orb. We're not leaving without it," Grant ordered. The final stand was about to begin.